Thanks for joining us today on The Perfect X. My name is Sherry, and this is my co host, Leigh.
Who still doesn't have any sort of greeting. Hello, people.
And today we're talking about attachment styles,
Mm,
which
Velcro.
Leigh brought up a great point right before. Well, Taryn did actually, but
No, it was all me.
but it's kind of, this was really shocking because we come up with topics and um, someone came to me with this topic and it really opened my eyes and I was like, oh my God, I never thought about attachment styles. And apparently this is like a really important thing. And the more I did research, I actually found it was super important. And like you were saying, Lee, like we're not experts in this. We're just sharing this so it opens your mind and maybe you do further research.
Just planting the
And
seed.
exactly, planting the seed and then you do more research and then you kind of identify this because this is actually really important. Like when I was going through it and then I kind of saw my own stuff, I was like, oh my God, like once you figure out what your attachment style is, you can kind of understand what is causing you to have a difficulty connecting with someone or possibly trying to connect in a way that's not healthy for you and then moving towards changing that and finding a better connection with someone.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I was kind of shocked how important these were, like and how it even starts. Like,
It seems
apparently,
similar
this
to like love language stuff, where if you don't understand some of these concepts, I feel like you spend a lot of time trying to put a square peg in a round hole. But if you can kind of
exactly,
wrap your head around some of this stuff, then you can have a better understanding of where someone else is coming from, I find.
exactly, and self, also just identify like why you're having certain issues once you find the root cause of it, right?
Hmm.
You know what I thought was really crazy is like I mean, I'm sure you read it too, is like that they say attachment styles are actually created from our first bond as infants.
Hmm.
Like that determines what kind of attachment style you have. Which is kind of crazy because when I got mine, I was like, but I had very involved family members,
Hmm.
but my attachment style was still something that was more independent. But I guess it's because I had a lot of freedom to be myself, so it made sense of why that would be my type of attachment style, you know?
Yeah, your parents have always had that this sort of like attitude, I think, where it's like they guide you in the right direction, but they're not like overly micromanaging how you figure your life out.
Yeah, they're not helicopter parents,
They probably should
but
have been, but that's a topic for another day.
yes, true. Um, but yeah, anyway, so it's attachment style is really how we connect with others in order to feel connected at all. So it really actually defines our our way of like if we feel loved and how we want to be loved. And they influence and shape the types of relationships we have. So it affects the way we respond to intimacy, what you need from your partner in order to feel intimate, and how you share or how you react to that intimacy in general. Like, so if they have a different type of attachment style, if it doesn't, connect with how you would feel it, love is should be shared or how love should be expressed, it can make you react.
It seems very similar to the love language thing, where you don't have to, if like you like giving gifts or something, but the other person has a different love language. It's like you kind of figure out how to meet in the middle and see what makes them feel appreciated versus what you would consider doing to make them feel appreciated. I think this sort of
Exactly.
follows a similar vein.
Yeah, exactly. It was just and then that was what was so nice is, like, once I learned about this, I was like, "How do we not talk about this?" Like, we talk about love languages, but I've never heard of attachment styles, and once I heard, I was like, "What the fuck? This is, like this could really be making or breaking a relationship, and it could really make or break your dating in general." Like,
Hmm.
honestly, like, if it's not working for you, like, for me, I was like, "Oh my god, this is my fucking problem." Like, we'll get into each one, and I was like, "This is why I don't like people. Like, I don't connect with people."
Yeah.
And once you can identify that, you can make the changes to have a better dating experience, you know?
Yeah. And you know what you want and how, or what other people want, how to sort of meet them in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it helps you overcome obstacles. That's really the truth to connect with people.
I think there's a lot of stuff about and relationships in general where people kind of know about maybe what it is, but they don't know what to call it or how to put it into words. But when you read something like attachment styles or love languages, it clicks because I think you know what it
Mhm.
means, but you didn't ever knew what to call it.
Exactly, exactly, and, like, it was kinda crazy, like, when we were talking to Jess a couple weeks ago and she brought up, like, "Oh, like, trust issues, whatever," and I'm like, "Me
Mhm.
too, I have those too," like, I couldn't find why or, like, put it into word, like, you're
Yeah.
exactly right, like, I couldn't, like, really word I'm like, "I just know I have a hard time letting people in," and then
Mhm.
once I read about it, I was like, "Oh my god, this is the behaviors I have that causes me not to let people let them in," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's exactly what you're saying. Like once you can identify it or put words around it or describe it, then you're like, okay, this is my action that causes this exact instance.
Mhm.
So so I mean, it really just defines the relationships you're having and the experiences in those relationships. So if, you want to understand your behavior, I think this is something that everyone should look more into. I think the only difference between this and love languages is like it's great for someone to know your attachment style, again, like love languages, because they know how to work with you. But
Mhm.
also, I think this one was a little bit more personal because then you really need, like, love language is like, okay, I need a like gifting in order to feel love. But attachment style is kind of like I do these things that causes me not to be loved, or I do
Mhm.
these things that causes me to push people away. And so it's really kind of something that you have to look in internally and work on yourself in order to overcome.
Well, I think too, if
And
you're aware of these things and you see the person maybe exhibiting these signs, you can understand that it's not like a like they're not trying to fight with you or be difficult. They're just like these are their default settings, and you can recognize those signs, and then you can adjust to work with them instead of just like it turning into a fight and you're like, I don't understand where this person's coming from. When you understand love languages and attachment um,
yeah,
styles, you can. I think it would be easier to recognize someone where they fall into those categories, and there's similar things in like even in the sales world where there's only so many types of sort of customers, and then you're like, oh, you identify their type, and then you can cater to that type. I think in a similar way, like this, if you see the signs that put someone into a particular category, like anxious or avoidance or whatever, um, you can better work with them instead of it just turning into like a big confusing argument.
that's exactly it. And I love how you said their default setting because it seems like it's a default setting. The way
Yeah,
it was, they say it's like it's from based on how you were raised
right.
and how you first formed your first relationship. So it is a default setting. So you are right. It helps you navigate that person better.
And I think
It's
that's a big
exactly
part
it.
in a relationship is just for any aspect of it is just being able to sort of understand where someone's coming from, even if they maybe don't, and then you can kind of handle it accordingly. Like instead of it just when you don't understand what they're saying, it tends to turn into can turn into an argument. If you are better equipped to sort of figure out what category they might be sort of leaning towards, then you can adjust to your strategy to kind of work better with them and try and understand where they're coming from, even if they maybe don't.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I mean, we should get into it so
Yes,
that we
let's
can
get
help
into it.
people. So there's 4 types of attachment styles. There's secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized, and we're gonna get into each one.
Hmm.
Um, and the last 3 are the ones that are considered insecure attachment styles. So everyone should be hopefully aiming towards a secure attachment style.
Hmm.
And then the last 3 are usually what we all default to, and they're caused by, like, a lack of trust or reliance of others. Usually, they cause us to behave in unhealthy, disorganized, or unnatural ways that, aren't pure to who we are or how we feel. It's usually caused from fear, and protecting ourselves, So
But they sort
it's
of all fall under that umbrella of an insecure attachment style. Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
last
the
three,
last
not
3.
secure,
Yeah.
obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, the last 3. So it's kind of, they're just ways of protecting ourselves. So they're
Hmm.
negative behaviors that are to protect ourselves from,
Now, have
whatever
you
it is that we're.
found, you mentioned those online quizzes and things. Have you found one that you thought was better than another, or is just to sort of determine your attachment style, or?
So I highly suggest everyone who's listening to look them up, all 4, and we'll get into them, but we're just touching the surface. But yes, there are quizzes online to figure out what kind of attachment style you are. I actually didn't do the quiz. As soon as I read them, I was like, "Oh my god, this is all my negative behavior in one category."
Mm, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I saw my 4 were so even and, we'll get into mine because mine's one of the I mean, right after secure, it's the first one. It's mine is avoidance. And I was like, my behavior, everything I kind of do in my date, like my negative dating behaviors was defined by avoidance. So I didn't actually end up doing the quiz. It was just so obvious.
It just jumped
My
out at you, you're right? Yeah.
yeah. And I think maybe because I'm like a loud person, my behaviors are loud too. So it was very obvious what I do, but I do recommend because they do interlap. If you can't figure it out, like if you are kind of like in between or you're not 100%, you can easily take a quiz and it'll tell you which of the 4 you are.
Giddy up.
So, secure attachment styles. What does that secure attachment style look like? Do you want to go for that? Or should I?
Yeah. It's so it's obvious. I mean, I guess the name sort of implies that it's easily trusting others, and you have good communication skills, and you are comfortable reaching out for emotional support. I guess you know what you need, and you are good at sort of vocalizing that. Like you're pretty self aware, and then comfortable being alone. Which is funny because I know a lot of people that aren't. Like those
Mhm.
get in their car and start disco dialing everybody, right? And that but yeah, I think the obviously, as you mentioned, the secure attachment style is the one that you, I don't know if you strive for, but I imagine that would be the ultimate goal if you could, would be ideal. But yeah, I mean, I could see these are all qualities people would like to have, but I could see how it would be a struggle to be, have all those on the go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was also more too. It says like comfortable in close relationships.
Yeah.
And you kind of, as we go through the other 3, I mean, these will make sense because the other ones kind of point out like people like I'm uncomfortable in close relationships. That's avoidant,
Right.
So,
Well, I think
uh,
ability to self-reflect is on here, and I think that like that's one that came to me like probably not to like my 30s, where I was like I could point at faults at everyone else, but I never gave a ton of thought to like what I was maybe doing wrong.
I think it's something we all go through, and
I
it's so
think to
crazy.
a
Once,
point, yeah, I think people
yeah,
do.
and
Just part of growing up. Like you're not very good at like at that, but I definitely feel like I know people now. I'm almost 40. I'm like these people are quick to judge other people and point out flaws in other people, but they have no idea how they are being. So I think that's important to be able to do. But yeah,
it
even
is
here too,
so
ability to
important.
manage conflict and that kind of. There's so many things that like from knowing how to handle people with different um, attachment types. I think would sort of help you get into the secure attachment type if you understand the other ones. I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was gonna say in the ability to self-reflect, I think it's something that the people I notice that don't do that, like we all have that problem as a kid, and then the most
Mhm.
people we hopefully can self-reflect and then change and grow. And I notice that people who can't self-reflect, they're stagnant. They're always the
Yeah,
same person. So it's so
absolutely.
important.
Yeah,
So it's a great thing to strive for. And then also it was saying like ability to manage conflict well,
yeah,
and that's usually high self-esteem. So that makes sense because if you our ability to manage a conflict means that you don't take everything with an ego or like in a reactive sense.
yeah. You
So
don't take
obviously it's
offense to
healthy.
things easily. Yeah,
And then it
yeah. I
said
think.
ability. Oh, sorry, go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, I was going to say that high self esteem in a way, like I can take credit. I feel like I can take criticism because I have fairly high confidence in general, like in like my job and things I'm doing. So if someone is to like come at me with some criticism, I think you're already fairly high and you're like, yeah, like I'm comfortable, I'm doing a good job and whatever, and there's always room for improvement. And I think you can
You
take
don't
that
take it as a
attitude.
dig. You take
No,
it as
yeah, it's
like they
just
want to
room for
help
improvement.
me better. Yeah, better myself. And that is
Yeah.
so important. And then I think the last one said ability to be emotionally available was is crazy. It's so true because if you're not having self-esteem and you're not comfortable and you're not secure, then it is really hard to be willing to be vulnerable and emotionally available. So it
Yeah.
is obviously it's great. I mean, it seems like secure attachment style is all about regulating emotions and being comfortable being yourself and in situations and also being comfortable losing. So
Yeah.
that's what it sounds like
Is
exactly
is
like
the goal to like be able to everyone to move into a secure attachment style, or are you are what you are, and life is about like learning to handle that? You know what I mean? Like, can you change your attachment style? I guess is my question.
I would say yes, of course. I think the goal is to be secure attached. I think that's the healthiest version
Right,
of
and then you
yourself
gotta
and a
find out
relationship.
where you are currently before you can figure out how to move from that style into a secure style.
Exactly, exactly. It's like just like if you were to like work out and you want to get to a certain physique, this is the same thing. You have to also work out your emotions. Like people
Mhm.
forget that. Like we go to the gym and or we eat healthy and we're like always working towards like that type of goal, but we forget that we emotionally have to work our so we have to work out our emotions and our personality. Like that is
Yeah.
also a part of life, and your whole goal in life should be to better yourself so that you have better experiences. Like the whole
Mhm.
secure attachment style means that you're having better experiences. Like for instance, your ability to take criticism, let's say at work,
Mhm.
allows you to hear people, understand, and better yourself versus somebody who doesn't feel secure is going to just feel attacked and the whole situation will be negative and it would be like a snowball effect of the
Mhm.
situation getting worse. So obviously it's like working and emotionally training yourself and emotionally like working out on yourself. I don't know how else
Yeah.
to explain it.
Well, the
Yeah, so
reason I bring that up is just because I keep likening this to love languages, but I think love languages are more about that's who you are and that's where you're at. Like I don't think that's meant to change, but this is more of like a more of a situation where you can actually change what category you're in, where love
mhm.
language is more like not, I think. Like I'm sure to a point you could, but like what makes you feel appreciated or loved is it is what it is, more or less, I think. Whereas the attachment style, it seems like from what you're saying is like the goal is to change it.
Yeah, it seems like that's what I understood when I was researching. Like you do want to change it in order to get into secure,
Makes
and
sense.
it's like you do want to work. These are things that are hindering you, and let's work towards the secure. So
Hmm. So what I guess you got to sort of hammer out what defines
so
each of the three, you know,
yeah,
sort of I don't know if they're negative ones, but the ones that are in the insecure attachment styles, I guess. So the first one would be avoidant, which is
yeah,
you, I think you're saying.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
and we should just say this because a lot of times like I have friends like if we say like oh that's insecure, they're like they get really you know like upset about that
Defensive.
word, get
Yeah.
defensive, and they get defensive. But it's the thing is we are all insecure. So I don't know
Hmm.
how else to describe these three other ones. That's how they're described when I read online, and that's how they're perceived. But these are things that hold us back. That's the reality, right?
Yeah, insecure is maybe not the exact word, but yeah, that's what they're described as, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, avoidant attachment style, and that's what I found I was.
Right.
And it's defined by the inability to build long-term relationships due to the inability to create intimate connection with another person.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting because like I would feel like, oh, I'm just not meeting people. I haven't liked someone in 10 years. That's like my go-to. I'm like, why are you single? I'm like, I haven't liked someone in 10 years. Like I'm just
Yeah.
not meeting the right person. And my mom always says, like, how can you go on so many dates and just never meet someone? I'm like, I don't know.
That's the million
And
dollar question.
right, right. And then I was like, oh my God, this is why.
I think you could
And
find something to not like about anyone, So if that's
yeah,
your default is to keep the walls up, like it's easy to to find a reason not to. It is a big gamble because the downside is very very big
and
potentially,
it's
right?
so funny that you say like, "Oh, you're keeping the walls up," because I didn't think I was like, "Well, I'm going out. I'm out there. I'm so easy to be criticized. Doesn't bother me." I thought I wasn't keeping the walls up, but when I read these next like things we're gonna go through, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. I do all of this." So it's
Yeah,
like,
like you seem like an open book in so many ways, but yeah, I
yes,
think you're an open book to the first few pages.
yes, yes, it's exactly, and that's why this is so great because after this, I read this, I was like, oh my God, I had to really self reflect and really see that it's actually my behavior that's holding back. It's not that I'm not meeting the right people, but my own behavior and the walls I had built, like walls I completely didn't know were there. So
Hmm.
how, do you want to read or should I read it?
Well, yeah, so I was just reading some of these, but I mean, for feel strong sense of independence, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but that's what they consider to be an avoidant quality.
Hmm.
Strong sense of
Yeah,
independence. I
yeah.
mean, how does that? I'm just looking at the. Um, it's funny
It's kind
because if you look at secure, right? Secure is comfortable being alone, right?
there's a
But
difference. There's a difference, and I'll tell you what it is because I see that with myself. Like I
yeah,
need to be independent. Like, there's a difference between, like, being comfortable, like and I actually can see that because I used to be comfortable being by myself, like, I had no problem doing things by myself,
And
but
then
now it's
now
like
you like prefer it kind of thing.
I almost feel like, and it's so funny because I've said it, Ali said it, Jessica said it, we all said it when we're describing why we're single or, like, what we're not finding, we're like, I feel like I have to do it myself or be by myself or someone else will fuck it up. And it's not
Yeah.
that you're capable of being by yourself. There's a difference between being capable and like needing to be by yourself because you don't trust someone else to fuck it
Right.
or to not fuck it up. And I think that's what it means when it says like feel a strong sense of independence.
I see, like,
And
just a preference to being alone versus being able to deal with it.
And instead, you're like avoiding emotional or physical intimacy. And that is true. Like, I avoid being intimate in any emotional sense or physical sense with someone. I don't even like being touched by people I don't know anymore.
Hmm.
And it's actually going out of my way to avoid those instances because I have to feel independent. So I think that's what it means by that.
So with the next one, uncomfortable expressing your feelings, obviously that's not like surface level feelings. That's more like involved feelings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I don't like deep conversations with people.
Yeah, yeah, that
Unless
makes
they're like
sense.
close, like I would have it with you, like it's you know what I mean? Like people who are in, but the outsider, like how are you ever gonna let someone new in if you're not
Yeah.
really expressing how you truly feel? And one thing I read on there was like people say like, oh, I don't really mind, I don't really care, it doesn't really bother me, and that's something that like I know I say a lot of.
Hmm.
And I remember one time my sister's like, "Why do you say that?" Because I know it bothers you, but you just told an entire room it doesn't. And then they keep on doing the thing that you claim doesn't bother you, and then you just cut them out, and you're like, "What a piece of shit." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I do that all the time."
But it might be
Like,
like just a defense mechanism where like you don't want to tell somebody what really bothers you for fear that they might like do more of it. Like you get
or
like
fear
giving
of
someone
me.
some sort of like one up on you somehow, right?
It's like a vulnerable, yeah, exactly, like one up or like feeling weak or like feeling like you're overly emotional because how could you be independent and overly emotional at the same time,
I think
right?
it is a natural reaction, but like I don't give a fuck. Like I don't give a
Yeah,
fuck. Like I
yeah.
think that's yeah, that makes sense.
And that's what it said. They said that all of these habits for all of the next ones are all things a way of protecting yourself. And when you don't give a fuck about anything or you pretend not to, then you are always protecting yourself, right?
That's definitely where I am. Like I've always been like, go and go fuck. You know what I mean? Like and just kind of run with it because it doesn't give. I feel like it doesn't give people a chance to get at you.
Yeah, and I like knowing you, I know things bother you. I know like deep down, like, you are an emotional person, but it's true, like you do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. This says, do you feel that you're dismissive of others? That just like quick to like when someone says something you don't like on like approaches you on online dating, you're very quick to be like, nah, fuck that guy. Like you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like I think that
100%.
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, there were so many messages that I even pointed out and you're like, that's not really a big deal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it would be hard to wade through all that, but yeah, I could see it's if you're sort of speed dating almost, you're trying to like sift through, but how someone would stand out, I don't know. But do you feel like you have a hard time trusting people? I don't know, like maybe like in depth, maybe, but yeah,
I think like the people in my inner circle, like people like you or like people I really know, not at all. But
but not new people, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Like it
it's
takes a
kind of
long time to like for someone to get to that level with you where you trust them.
and another thing which what I was finding really and I think that like someone like Jess or Ali and I when we're dating probably wouldn't realize that we don't not trust people because we're like so outgoing. We share our private stuff, like things that happen that are negative. We're like, oh, I'll totally share my story. But actually, when it comes to letting them in and not, we don't trust that they won't try to make a mess of our life. And that's
Yeah.
what I saw in all three of us. So it's kind of funny, like when you read this, like you wouldn't think these things of like outgoing people, right? But I
Hmm.
am untrusting. I don't trust someone to come in and not ruin what I've so peacefully created my life, you know?
My friend Dave, who I don't know if he listens to this, but I've known him like most of my life, and he's very cut and dry with a lot of things, and I always count on him for like an honest opinion,
Hmm.
and he always says, people in your life are either an asset or a liability, and that's the sort of the like it's a bit sort of generic, but that's kind of like what it boils down to. And I think if
Hmm.
you're single and you're looking at bringing someone into your life, you're like, I'm completely fine now the way I am. So there's almost the only way I could see this going is the person becoming a liability to me in some manner. They're like, yeah, there's a chance that they could become an asset in some way, but you're like, I'm pretty well set the way I am and happy. So I think that it's easy to look at any relationship as just a potential liability.
And it's actually really cutthroat what you're saying about he does, but it actually is true because I do know I'm like that and a lot of people like that when you do almost consider someone, then it almost becomes like you have to think, well, what is the asset that they could bring in? And then
Yeah.
you're looking at them not really as the in the emotional sense, but you're like, will they make my life better? And then you start to like make this almost transactional and then you dismiss them
Well,
because
I
you're
feel
like,
like
well,
it's
actually,
almost
no.
like I think of it like having a kid like is something that unless you've had a kid,
Mhm.
you just don't get it. Like I never had any aspirations of like getting married and having kids and doing any of that stuff. And now that I have a kid, it's like everything else is so inconsequential to that. Like I just couldn't even explain it, right? And I had no interest in people that used to try to explain it to me. But I think
Mhm.
if you're single and happy and you have a full life and everything's kind of like more or less set, it would be hard to visualize it getting even better with like the right person because
Yeah.
statistically, I'm sure it's much more likely to go the other way.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
what's the risk reward
Yeah.
is out, right?
Yeah, and then it becomes transactional, you're like, "Well," and then you, like, look at the person, you're like, "Well, here are 5 things." You know, it always reminds me of remember Ross when he made that, like, pro and con list of Rachel on Friends? It's like
I'm
you
proud to
start
say I've actually never seen that show.
Oh, really? Never?
Oh, I tried. Like, people say you're either a Seinfeld person or a Friends person. I just really like Seinfeld, and
But I
I've
like both.
I've tried watching Friends on numerous occasions, and I don't know. I just can't get into it. I don't. Maybe I haven't given it like a hard enough try,
I've
but
then you're the second person I've ever heard say that because I have my girlfriend who just told me to, my best friend, she's like, "Oh, I just found out she's never watched Friends." And she's
yeah.
always like, we're going back and forth, like, "Oh, watch this show. You should watch this show." And now every time she says, "Is there a show I should watch?" I just say Friends. Like,
Well,
I'm
I've
driving her
seen some
crazy.
clips that are like kind of funny. I'm like, ah, it's like
She
okay,
doesn't
it's
find
like
it funny either. But Jody
yeah,
is so funny on there.
yeah, I do. I have seen clips of like I know the characters and whatever, but like I have seen clips that are kind of funny. But I'm like, I sit down to watch it, and I'm like, I've given it a try a few times. I just like can't get into it, but
Mhm.
never
Well,
mind.
I highly suggest it. But it's a he made a pro and con list, and I think that's what you start doing with people, and it becomes un unauthentic, right?
I think
So
just to circle back to my point about the kid thing though, I'm like I feel like if your life's like complete, it's hard to visualize. Well, it says here, believe part of avoidance attachment styles is believing that you don't need others in your life,
mhm, mhm.
and it's so easy to say that when you maybe have never had a really good relationship or have never, like I said in my case, never had a kid, and then you have a kid, and you're like it's so you can't even explain it. Like it's
Yeah.
just it makes everything else so inconsequential, so minute, right? So if you've never had a great relationship, I could see it being really hard to like go all in on something when you're like, my life's great the way it is, and I don't see a lot of positives to like a relationship. Like, like I see a lot of, divorce and sadness and whatever. And statistically, that's probably more likely the way it's going to go. So someone like yourself, that's pretty well established otherwise, is probably like, fucking talk me into it. Sell me this pen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's really bad, and the reality is it keeps you from connecting with other people, and it
Yeah.
keeps you from ever letting anyone close to you, and we should share that the avoidance style, which I think is actually more I feel like almost 50% of society is actually under the avoidant, it is umbrellaed under the definition of commitment issues. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
really what this one comes down to, but it's these behaviors that make us think we have commitment issues when really it's avoiding commitment out of fear, right?
I was gonna
So
say it's funny to say you have a commitment issue. Maybe it's like I just don't have any interest in commitment. That's not like a.
but
It's
that's the
different if you're getting into a relationship and then getting out because you don't like the commitment. But it's like if you're not getting involved in the first place, it's not
yeah,
really as
yeah,
big of an issue.
yeah. And then what it said is that it causes, and I've had this experience a million times. Guys always say to me like, "You're not emotionally available," or they always tell me like, "Oh, I feel like you're always 1 foot out the door." So those are all characteristics. If you hear people saying to you, you might want
hmm
to look into it because it makes, or like I've also heard like people say like, "I don't really feel like you're that interested in me," and sometimes I have been interested. I just don't know how to show it. So
Like it's
I
not you.
do.
I'm not interested in anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Don't feel
it
bad.
leads
Better men than you have come and gone.
Yeah, and it's true. They really, I've met some great guys, but yeah, it's kind of always having a lack of connection. So, and then the next one is anxious attachment style.
This is
So
my
this
favorite.
this one is defined by a fear of rejection or abandonment. And this sort of attachment style constantly needs reassurance and validation from their partner.
This one's like the ironic one because it's like your need of reassurance pushes them away a lot of
Yeah,
times. So it's like
yeah.
it's almost ironic where like it that that sort of style or that it makes it worse essentially, right?
It's all comes from, like, the fear of being left behind, so you're
Mhm.
constantly doing, like, things like jealous outbursts and distrust in their partner, like, you constantly are assuming they're cheating on you or, like,
Right.
assuming there's something else going on and they're gonna leave you, like, you're always on edge that that person's gonna leave you, and
Mm.
it causes, like, detrimental fights or frivolous, like, little frivolous fights over, like, such stupid things or, like, big fights over frivolous things is what I'm
Right.
saying,
Yeah. I
and
do. This
then
seems like I would, if I had to put money on it, I'd be like, this is the one that most people are in this category. You were saying it's the last one, right? You're saying that that was the one that
I come across a lot
statistically.
of the last one, but I feel like when we were younger, like you would hear a lot of like, you're like, oh my God, he's crazy or she's crazy. And I would say it's anxious attachment style. I have a lot of friends, I think, that are more like on my end,
The
but I
avoidance
would
style.
say as a, yeah, yeah, but I would say as a kid, I could really outline a lot of anxious attachment styles.
Did
And I just
you
think
felt like you were that way as a kid? Like you felt like you
never,
had no, I didn't think so. I was like, I thought that's what you're saying, but no, like,
no,
but
no.
I would if I had to put money on one of them having the most people in a category, it all the way is so far as anxious attachment style because the complaints I hear as a guy are almost all falling into the anxious attachment category.
And I was just gonna say, I could think of so many people around us growing up that said the same things about that. And I know what we're both avoiding saying is like back in the day, they would say, "Oh my gosh, she's so crazy," or like, "Oh my god, he's a psycho," or like,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And it's true. Like where we grew up, I saw a lot of this, and I don't think either one of us have ever been this way.
No,
I know
which
I
is
haven't. I
odd
know you
because my
haven't.
wife's, like, so much better looking than me, like, it's like I would think people think that I should have anxious attachment style, like, I was showing a girl at work the other day, she's into four-wheeling, I was showing her some four-wheeling pictures on Instagram, and she's like, "Oh, is that your wife?" I'm like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Really?" Like, something like that, I'm like, "Fuck you, man, like, the fuck's that supposed to mean," right? But, anyway,
We
yeah,
all feel that way.
I
We all
know,
feel
it's
that
like
way.
it's like almost unanimously people are like, "Really?" Like, it's like they assume I'm she's like some sort of charity worker and I'm like a handicapped kid that she sort of spends time with or something. But I'm like, but anyway, yeah, like it is funny. Like people think that I would fall into that category because she's like very typically attractive and that kind of thing.
But
And I'm
I've
like,
never
I'm
seen you act like this.
no, I don't know. I just have the belief that like, people choose to be together and that's sort of it. And if you don't want to be, then you deal with that when you get to it. But we have a good communication and all that kind of thing. I should be a lot more insecure than I am, is what I'm
No,
trying
no, no, shut up.
to say.
Shut up. Okay, well, let's go through the thing. So it was clingy tendencies,
The worst.
highly sensitive to criticism,
Also bad.
needing approval from others. You have none of these. I don't know what
No,
you
I
do
don't
with
have any
this.
of the
You
I
no,
rightly should, but
no. Jealous tendencies, difficulty being alone, low self-esteem, feeling unworthy of love, intense fear of rejection, significant fear of abandonment, and difficulty trusting others.
and these they feel like you were saying these are usually like come from like your first intimate relationship, like it'll be like a parent or something like that, or like your first like
Yeah,
relationship.
I could see that, like, it could be from a parent. Usually, they say like the first connection, and I actually can see why it would happen for some people. Like, if you're like a lot of people, like they're not like their mom or dad left them. Like maybe
Hmm.
when you were a baby, your dad just up and left and never came
Right.
back.
That makes
That
sense.
would cause
Yeah.
all of this stuff because all of this is, and actually, so it makes sense why you wouldn't have this. Um, so all of this
I
is
think.
kind of like being left behind probably by a parent. It could be seen a lot in adopted people, or like maybe you had a parent that was working so much and never gave you any attention. So all of this kind of manifests and then creates a fear of abandonment, like because you have been abandoned, right? Or
Yeah.
in some form or sense you felt abandoned. So it's not always that, like, maybe you did have both parents at home, but your parents were working so much and so they were never around. So that's why this could be caused, right? So
Mhm.
that's where that's from. And I mean, I think if this one is very, very big on saying that you're really causing issues that are non-existent and
Yeah.
fights, and it causes you to break up. So if you relate to any of this, I would look into it further and really work on
Yeah, get your shit in a pile, people.
it.
It definitely, like, I time and time and time again, this is, like, the stuff that guys complain about girls. And I suppose the other way around too, I don't have a lot of girlfriends, but I suppose, like, um, girls definitely don't like. I'm generalizing, but in my experience, the girls I know don't like guys that have low self esteem and are like kind of needy and like need reassurance and things.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
your attitude and the way you act and like treat them and conduct yourself with other people will should, I would think, give them the confidence that, like, that you have boundaries and you're not flirting with other people and you're not going anywhere, and if there is a problem you'll tell them. But there's time and time again, the arguments I hear between couples often seems to come back to this category more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that, like, I've seen it with a friend of mine, um, and again, when we're younger, so I don't know if she's still this way, so I don't wanna say anything about that, but I do remember, like, so her dad did leave when she was very, very young,
Hmm.
and she did have a boyfriend that really loved her, and
Hmm.
he honestly, like, I would see him out. I never saw him, like, cheat or talk to another girl, or I mean, he would talk because he's human, but, like, not, like, hit on another girl, you know?
Right. He just
And he
barks
never
at them, doesn't say anything.
or meow sometimes. But, um, but he never actually did anything that would look like cheating or that he was gonna leave her.
She was
But
just
in the
worried about
end,
it,
always, and she would always have these outbursts about it.
and
And
then
in the
that
end, he that was why he broke up with her, because she was so this behavior causes the breakup rather than what you're fearing itself, you
it's funny.
know?
Yeah, it's
So,
like there's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's like that kind of thing where it's
yeah.
like your ironically, like, your concern about them leaving you is driving them to leave you.
Exactly, exactly, and so this is one of those that I would highly suggest someone look into, because it's not worth it, like, it's not
Yeah.
worth
Yeah, if you're getting
always
into
being
fights about
feared.
things like that where you're one person is like upset about the other person having jealous tendencies and like having people of the opposite sex around or whatever, and that's causing like a fight, like you choose to be with the person you're with, like no one's got a gun to your head. So you need,
Mhm.
if you can recognize those signs and figure out a way to like get a grip on them, I think that's important. It's not to say that those feelings aren't valid, but you've got to know that a person is choosing to be with you and they're not likely to be, if they wanted to be with someone else, they'd be with someone else, right? So yeah, like you're
Exactly.
saying, if you can feel like this applies to you, definitely, like, don't just ignore it. Like, don't think, oh, my guy or my girl's just got to be less flirty and less whatever with other people, or whatever it might
Like,
be.
don't
Just like,
talk to anyone of the opposite
yeah,
sex
like,
or
am
anything
I
like
being
that.
unreasonable? Like, because
Yeah.
there is times when that person is being flirty and being inappropriate and whatever. But like, if you find this discussion is happening time and time again, like, don't let it ruin your relationship. Like, try and get in front of it.
It really comes down to, like, there being actually nothing concrete as an
Right,
issue,
like,
but
no
you
real
causing
issues, yeah.
issues.
Like, if your
Yeah, but
guy's disappearing for, like, 6 hours in the middle of the night on a Saturday or whatever, like, that's not
you might wanna look
they're
into
just
that.
gaslighting you, yeah, yeah, but if it's, like, they're legit, like, good person and you're just, like, looking for trouble, like, "Oh, there's some girl at work or there's some girl at his gym or some guy at her, whatever class," it's like, people are out there every day, like, I don't, it's just a security thing, and, like, it's just if you see those signs, like, don't let it ruin your relationship, ultimately.
Exactly, because then what you exactly like you said, what you're fearing is gonna cause you to
Yeah.
break up over nothing, you
Oh
know?
yeah, ironically, like, over that issue, which isn't an issue, is ruining your relationship. And I see it time and time and time again. Like, it's out there, and if you feel like you're getting into arguments about this stuff, and one person's like, just I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it's just someone at work, like whatever, right? Or it's just someone in my class. It's like, it's such a final. Obviously there's instances of either or, but yeah, it's like having any kind of problem. You got to be willing to admit it and like look into how to correct it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Want to look at the
that's
last one?
true.
Disorganized? Is that the last one?
Yeah, I mean, the last one we can't say too much about because this one is, associated with mental health conditions. So
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
the best form of help for this would be like medical help or designated doctor, and it's usually caused by mood disorders, personality disorders, self
Hmm.
harm, substance use disorder. So I mean, we can't get say too much about the last one, But again, if you do the test, it's called disorganized attachment style,
Hmm.
and it's defined by extremely inconsistent behavior and difficult trusting others.
I
And then,
actually had this like when I was younger with anxiety, and a lot of the blowouts and things I would have would be because of inconsistency. Like I would go somewhere with a girlfriend that we've probably been before, and I would have this horrible anxiety about crowd. I have like I don't want to say I have agoraphobia, but like it's getting that way, like it's leaning that direction. So it's like
mhm.
I would just have like an anxiety attack practically, and then we would get in a fight. And she's like, "Why are you fucking mad? Like we've been here before. Like, yeah, it's busy or whatever." And I just couldn't like even vocalize like how I felt, you know. So that, and that is like you say, like it is like a mental or a biological issue, right? Like you can, you know, and so if you, and it's hard to put the finger on because all through my 20s and stuff, I would blame the environment for it, like what environment I was
Well,
in.
we didn't know about this stuff when we were in our 20s. This
Yeah, like
wasn't
I would just
something
have
that was
anxiety
talked
attacks,
about.
and sometimes, and to the point of this disorganized attachment style, the inconsistency is what got me. Like if I was that way every time, we could have maybe dealt with it. But because I would have blowouts going to do the same thing we always do, and then just one day I would have a blowout about it, she would be like, "What the hell is your problem?" Like, and I don't know, and I don't have the mental capacity to like look inward, so I would just turn on her and get mad at her. 'Cause she's getting mad at me, right? You know?
I love that you share this because it's such a personal thing, and I think, what we really should say, like, I think it's because I do know you got help for this later on and
Yeah.
stuff, but what's really interesting is we didn't even have the word anxious growing up. Like,
No,
I remember hearing that a few years ago, and I was like, "What the fuck is
it was just like
anxiety?" Like,
anger because
yeah,
it would always turn
yeah.
to anger, right? You would get
Or
anxious and
like,
then you
"Don't
would
be
lash out.
dramatic." That was what we got,
Right,
like,
yeah,
"Oh,
that's
you're
another one.
dramatic. Oh,
Yeah.
because 'cause you're" yeah, like, there was no I honestly remember hearing the word anxiety, like, 5 years ago, I'm thinking, like, "No, that's not a thing." Like,
Mhm.
but actually looking back and it's like, "Oh, I have" like, most of us have so many behaviors that are anxious, and
Yeah.
because we didn't grow up knowing it, it's so hard for us to understand it, and I think a lot of our generations are now starting to understand it. The younger generation, they fully have a grasp and they have all these wordings for it and they know everything
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But you see it like, and you actually see it like a lot with a lot of parents because they grew up with like zero talk of this, you
Yes,
know?
yeah.
And then you like see them and they're like, oh my God, like if that mom could just have the right medication, like this would be managed so much better,
Yeah.
or the right therapy or what however they would like to manage it. But it is something that is out of control. And oh, we should like say what the stances are for it. It was fear of rejection.
Yeah, inability to regulate emotions, which was like a huge one for me. Like that was one of the biggest ones. I just lash out, you know. And then, contradictory behaviors is like another one, like doing the same activity and reacting differently to it different days. And that's what I would do as well, right? And then high levels of anxiety. Well, you may not know what that means. Like, what does that mean to you? High levels of anxiety. Like, I'm not anxious. Well, anxiety manifests in a lot of different ways, but if I'm not sure how I'd even word it because I actually was diagnosed with like depression at first, and it turned out to not really be depression. It was anxiety, and like you said, that word wasn't even out there. Like, I went to the doctor, and I'm like, I'm depressed, and they're sort of like, you don't seem depressed, you know. So,
Yeah.
but we didn't have a word for it really, and I was like, really, what it is anxiety. I'm not really depressed at all. I'm anxious at times, right? So I don't know how to explain how it feels. I'll tell you what, the only biological feeling I can explain to it is like, say you are going down the stairs and you sort of miss that last stair, and you like say, you know, like say you step off two instead of one, right? And you
Mhm.
get that like drop in your stomach feeling, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's like
Like you feel like you're about to fully face
yeah,
plant
like
for
you
no,
basically
even
miss
though it's just one step.
right, or you step off a curb you didn't realize was there, like you're carrying a bunch of books or something you can't really see right in front of you. You step off a curb you didn't realize was there. That's like what anxiety feels like, but like sitting on the couch. You know what I mean? So
That's actually a really good way of describing it. That
that's the only way
it's
I
like
can think to really like put it into words to someone that doesn't have it, you know, or doesn't realize they have it. But
because you
that's
feel you lost control even though you haven't really lost anything, right?
yeah, and then and then it turns into like lashing out because especially if you don't know what it is, like you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm not happy in this situation, and then you just start freaking out, like I don't want to be here, and why did you drag me here, and blah blah blah, and then they're like, what the fuck's your problem? You were here last week, right? And for me, it was always crowds and stuff, you know.
Mhm.
And I would
Mhm.
sometimes
No.
I'm fine. I go, and what it was for me, I think too, was alcohol would take the edge off. So if I was in a social situation and I had a few drinks, I felt a lot less anxious. But if I was in the exact same scenario and not drinking, the anxiety would like flare up, you know?
It's actually interesting you said because there's also a lot of people like I see like in our generation too, like they actually stopped drinking because they realized that they on an everyday situation like where they thought they were fine and then they would be in the same situation later, but they weren't drinking and they would have a panic attack or an anxiety
Yeah,
attack.
yeah,
And then they were like, oh, actually, I need to learn to regulate my situations. And the alcohol was actually worse for me because I can't regulate or actually figure my triggers when
yeah.
I'm just numbing them.
And that's what I was
So
doing.
I,
Like I would drink all the time, right? Like in my early 20s, I would drink like 5 nights a week.
because you
And
didn't know what you were dealing with and you
yeah,
didn't know
I
how
just
else to
knew it
numb
made
it.
me feel better, but I didn't really even equate it to that. I just knew, and Tara would say that she's like, you used to go out and go to clubs and events and blah blah blah, and like house parties of no one you knew and blah blah blah, and now you're like basically agoraphobic. And I'm like, yeah, and I the only thing that was different was alcohol. Right, I was drinking, and I never even made that connection at the time. I just thought about it later. She's like, why now? Like, why can't you be in crowds and like I go to her dance, like I don't know if it's a recital or a show, and people scream like because to get the energy going and stuff, and I am
Mhm.
like in fight or flight mode. I'm like I'm gonna fucking kill everybody in here, right? Because it just makes me like scared almost, right? But I go to the same thing with a few drinks in me, and I'm fucking the loudest guy there, right? You know what I mean? So it's she was like that, contradictory behaviors and inability to. It's like I'm fucking this guy, you know what I mean? So
But it's great. I love that you're sharing this because it's, I mean, we should tell us like this is a big share. So, I mean, it's great. And it's really not something that you can, like the other ones, I think you can control based on, like, again, like training your behavior,
yeah,
like working it out. This is something that they really said it's something that you need to see a doctor for because it's
yeah.
either you need therapy and they give you the emotional tools. Like, it's so much further beyond than just like learning to trust somebody. It's actually having like very specific tools in place or taking medication or however it is that they work with you to overcome this.
And sometimes you find
Um,
there's triggers for anxiety. Like for me, caffeine makes it much, much worse. And I
mhm.
didn't know, man. I'm like getting in late 30s before I realized that caffeine like made it way worse, And I have friend, my sister's anxious like crazy, and she's crushing these like Monster Energy, like triple caffeine, fucking, you know what I mean, like these deals. And she's like, yeah, I don't know what it is. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, bro? You could run a fucking drag car on that shit, you know.
I
And
used to love
but
those
anyway,
too.
it's like being somewhat self-aware, like write down everything you eat every day, and then like map it out, and then like say pops on the list, cross pop out, don't have any pop for like a week, and then start eliminating things from your diet, and then you might find that your anxiety is like a dietary trigger. I'm not a doctor, don't take my advice, but like just if you're looking to try stuff, like that's what I did, and I realized sugar because I get the high and then the low, and then caffeine, same sort of behavior, and avoiding those things is not necessarily a substitution for any sort of medication, but it certainly keeps the highs and lows down.
And also, that issue because our bodies all work differently. We metabolize things differently. So it can affect one person so much more than the other.
Right.
So
Like yeah, like
again,
Taryn, like I could drink caffeine and go to sleep. It doesn't bother me, but it gives me anxiety. But Taryn drinks a coffee at like 3:30 in the afternoon. She's up all night. So it does affect
exactly.
everybody differently.
Exactly. And there was two more signs of this one, which was again overlapping, which is why people should probably take the quiz because they do again overlap. And it was difficulty trusting others, and it says signs of both avoidant and anxious attachment styles for this one.
Yeah.
So, I think this one is a little bit more in depth, and again, definitely like a disorder that you would probably need a doctor for.
And
But
there's lots of quizzes online with regards to anxiety and depression as well. Because the quiz, when they give you medication for it tries to differentiate between anxiety and depression. So there's lots of those types of quizzes online,
which is
and
really interesting. Like, it is true because I remember one time you told me you were depressed. I'm like, well, you're like one of the happiest people I know.
right.
So it is funny that um, you know, because it is true, like sometimes anxiety can be defined as depression and it really may not be at all the same thing,
They
but hard
do.
to
They are
define.
used almost interchangeably, yeah, but they are like different biologically, but with similarities. For years I went around being treated for depression, which I didn't really have. So it's only maybe a year ago, I figured out it was really more of an anxiety problem, and then
And they probably have different treatments.
they do, like, I changed medication. I take Zoloft, which is, I forget, I don't have the information on it, but it's more geared towards an anxiety issue than a depression. Because I was taking stuff for depression, I'm really not depressed, so
Mhm.
yeah, it was interesting, but it certainly helps. But I think as much as that helped, the dietary awareness helps as well.
That's great. I think all of this information is great. Let's not go over too much. I
Yeah.
loved this one. I guess we'll
See,
just end it.
people should try and look and see which category they fall into, because that might set you on the road to figuring out more stuff.
And then create a healthy relationship. And if you're single, it might actually lead you to a healthy relationship. Like yours really helped you deal with a lot of things when you figured it out. And mine really, honestly, like I just was a slap in the face recently. I will definitely have to work out those movements and change it. But well,
Yeah, I
perfect.
mean,
Let's not go. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, let's just say, like anything, improvement wise, it's all positive. Like, you do like self reflect and like do a bit of reading and learn about more things. There's no downside. You might just stumble across something that helps, and that's basically what happened to me. I just kind of stumbled backwards into this anxiety stuff and figured out how it affected me. So yeah, just maybe take a look at the four categories and see if which one applies to you, and then what you might need to do to transition into a different one.
Yeah, and find a healthier version of yourself. And one last thing I'll say is, my sister always says to like be kind to yourself. So,
Mhm.
know that change and self growth and self improvement takes time.
Yes.
You're going to
Yeah.
take as many steps back as you go forward, and just be kind to yourself through the process and know that's part of life.
That's right, motherfuckers.
Yeah. And look, we both related to two attachment styles, and it's great. It shows people that you're not alone. Like
Mhm.
everyone goes through it. So
Absolutely.
perfect. Right. Well, we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.